I'm very excited to introduce our next panel. Our next conversation is with two founders and YC alum who are making a big impact in the world, Rose Afriyie and Phaedra Ellis-Lamkins. So Rose is the founder of mRelief, a nonprofit that helps families sign up for food stamps. Rose grew up in the Bronx and got into tech because she believed that writing software is a superpower that women of color and people of color should have exposure to. And Phaedra is a co-founder and CEO of Promise, a company that is reworking the bail system in the US. And moderating today is YC's Michael Seibel. So I would love to welcome Michael, Rose, and Phaedra.
All right. Thank you for the intro, Kat. Let's jump right in. So to start, Phaedra and Rose, both of you are running what I would call non-stereotypical startups. I think there's a myth out there that startups and maybe companies in general kind of have to be a little evil, like have to be more focused on making money than anything else. And maybe they don't need to work on making the world a better place. And you two have built startups that not only kind of defy that, but you've gotten a lot of support from the startup community while defying that. So can you talk a little bit about that myth and how you've been able to defeat it?
Hey everyone, I'll kick things off. This is Rose Afriyie, Executive Director of the nonprofit organization mRelief. And mRelief is effectively the easy-to-use platform, online and text messaging for Americans to sign up for SNAP, also known as the food stamp program. Michael, you're absolutely right. I definitely think that there's this idea that when you're starting a company, it's just exclusive focus on the profit motive, and there's not room to also really be able to balance that objective of sustainability with making an impact. And we've completely turned that on its head. At mRelief, we're an all-woman software development team that's based and headquartered in the city of Chicago. So we don't look like the typical team. We're also majority women of color. So it definitely has been our experience that you can build a different company that's centered on inclusion and centered on client dignity. And also, I think for us, it was really about building a leading platform that could solve a problem that was solvable. So the challenge of the $11 billion that went unclaimed each year for SNAP, and the opportunity to make sure families can claim it while centering equity, dignity, and compassionate casework.
What about you, Phaedra? You're making the world a better place. How'd you pull that off in the evil Silicon Valley?
It's such a, I guess I don't think about it one as evil. I think the problem is most people who are resourced are solving problems that are important to them. And those just aren't the problems that are important to me as a Black woman who's a mom in her 40s. And so what I'm trying to figure out is how to solve problems for the things that impact my family. And so the criminal justice system was really about addiction, mental health treatment, and those are the problems. Like it just happens that, you know, walking a dog or babysitting, like those weren't the valet parking, those aren't the problems that were important to my family. And so I think the real opportunity we have is to create resources for people who want to solve problems that are important to our own communities. And that's what it was for me. I do want to correct, like I want to make money. Like I just want to also make a important thing, which is I think the reality is we are using our startups as tools for intervention in the system. But I absolutely think the success of my company is about building generational wealth and about scale. And so I think about revenue as a critical tool for change. And so to the extent we make more revenue, we are creating greater impact. But I don't think of it as like, you know, and I just think we are helping people stay out of the system. And so if I get good at that, if I help more people, if I make more revenue, if I show that people of color can be at the forefront and can be executives, I think then we show, because like I know hustlers who run better companies than dudes. It's just they got $100 million to figure out how to solve their problem. And so it's like, we're going to figure it out. So I just want to be clear, like we're trying to make money, we're trying to solve a problem, and it's just one that matters to the people I grew up with.
So Phaedra, I'm happy you took us down this route because when I tell the story about Promise behind your back when you're not there, I talk about this alignment of mission and making money. And what was interesting is that you pivoted when you were in the position where you were making money, but you realized that maybe the thing you were building didn't align with your mission. I found that ridiculously impressive, because I think that many founders in that moment, the mission gets a little pushed to the side. So can you talk about the pivot and what it took to kind of to do it? Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. And you've been incredibly supportive and definitely one of my favorites. We originally started the company to think about how to scale bail reform and how to help people get out as quickly as possible who didn't have money, because 2/3 of the people that are incarcerated are there before they've been actually convicted of the crime that they were arrested for. So that just seems like a broken system. And so we started selling. And you're right, we had really early success. We started making money. And then what we realized is I didn't love our clients. And our incentives weren't aligned. Like selling to, the problem is, you think about incentives is people who run jails get paid per person per day. Trying to get them to do something where I want to get people out is our incentives are not aligned. And so that was one problem. The second problem is that I didn't like I liked the clients we made, but I didn't like the potential clients. And so I went places where they were like bragging about people keeping in jail 7 years pre-trial on a marijuana arrest, where we saw people tell homophobic jokes. And I was just like, I knew I couldn't be a good salesperson and scale because I couldn't control myself and not say, look, that's homophobic. Like, we're not for that. I couldn't sell to that people. And so we made a decision, which you and most of our investors supported, which is we still had capital because we'd made money. And I went back and I just said, we can give anyone capital back that wants it. We are not going to do this because I am not going to contribute, because what we realized is people would use our technology for bad. And even if we intended it for good, because the systems were totally broken, they would use it in a negative way. And I just felt like there are so few women of color. By then we'd raised like almost $12 million. Like, if I use technology for bad, like why invest in me? Why fund me? Why? And I'm not doing it with my own life. So you helped us and others. And we just were like, what's the problem? How are people ending up in jail? And what we realized is a lot of it came down to fees and fines. And so we wanted to understand it. And we looked at Oakland as an example. And we went to Oakland and we were like, because we had seen people in jail for parking tickets in New Orleans, and said, why are people in jail? We went and met with Oakland and we're like, how would you, if I can't afford it, how would I handle it? You had to owe $500. You had to pay $250 up front. You had to come and improve your report. You had to have like a money order. You had to have taxes. And it was just like the most broken system we'd ever seen. So we were just like, that's silly. So we just put up a website, we just put up our money and we paid in Oakland. 94% of people paid back. We didn't make them prove anything. We didn't threaten them. We had no power of enforcement. And then we did it in Philly, and then we did it in Denver. And what we learned is that that was the most effective thing. And so we're building a payment system that recognizes the needs of working people, and it's working really well. We're growing really rapidly. And I think because it doesn't make sense that poor people in the systems and they require are the most difficult to deal with it. And then what happened when we built these systems for poor and working people, government said, wait, you can pay Venmo and Cash App. It's not just poor people that want that. All of the people who use our systems. And so our first pilot went from 100 to 7,000 to 14,000 people to 240,000 people. And so we've been in a period of real growth. And it feels right because it's consistent with our values.
I love that story. I love retelling that story. And I think it's the coolest story ever. Rose, one of the things that you and I have spoken about a lot over the years is being a nonprofit that's primarily creating software and that sells its software and generates revenue. In my opinion, this is a new trend, and mRelief in many ways is at like the tip of the spear on this. So talk about the experience of, instead of trying to go to donors, telling your customers, hey, you got to write a check.
Yeah, so I think one of the things that was really, really critical, and I'll also just kind of tell the story of how we got into YC, because I think it was a huge push in that direction to help us rethink our approach, because we were actually not accepted the first time we applied into YC. And it was one of the most thoughtful rejection letters I had ever received in my life, where, you know, Sam Altman mentioned that, you know, if you really want to be able to make an impact, it's really critical that you can work on sustainability and not just exclusively rely on donations. And so that really made us rethink about our approach. And what we focus on is helping first families find out if they're even eligible for social services, in part because when families apply and they're ineligible, that costs the government a lot of money. And so that became a huge case for us to bring to our local city in the city of Chicago. And it took us no time at all to close our first city contract in helping them help families first with things like early learning programs, so that parents could find out if they were eligible for resources that could help place their small children into teaching and education programs. And so we had a really exciting opportunity to build not just that, but for many different verticals. And so it was with that we then re-engaged YC, and then were ultimately accepted. And it really just became a watershed moment of us then looking and following our growth. So we learned that not all social service programs are created equal. There are some where you actually can get something catalytic for your family to take $374 in food benefits off your balance sheet every single month. And there are some where, you know, you might be eligible for the program, but there's a 2-year waiting list in your city, right? And so it was also with your advice, as we were really following our revenue, but also following focus, that we saw, wow, the most tangible impact that we can make month over month in a family's life is helping them take this food bill off their balance sheet. And our average family that we help, we can help them take off $375. And so $300 million access later, it's been a huge, huge opportunity for us to do that, but also do it with sustainability in mind.
So the next question is for both of you. The conventional wisdom in the Valley is that it's impossible to sell software to government. So what are you two doing? You're not supposed to be able to sell software to government. Government's supposed to be slow, and they're supposed to take forever, and RFPs, and watching from the outside, I constantly see you two just kind of violating that rule and saying, no, yeah, you can sell stuff to the government, it's fine. Talk about that. And where do you think, for people in the audience who might be thinking that they would want to solve problems that have to interact with the government, any tricks, hacks, hints on how to sell software to the government? Whoever wants to take that first, feel free.
Want me to go, Rose?
I'll happily jump in. I feel like you are the government whisperer there. So maybe you go first, and then I'll supplement what you don't cover.
Okay, our fastest close, when we met with someone on Friday and they got it approved by their board on Tuesday, which just happened a couple months ago, which felt really exciting. One is I'm very petty. And these, like, when we were in the payment space, this guy was like, you can't do this. So I was like, now I'm going to do it quicker and better and faster. And so one is, I'm like, that was really helpful to be told you couldn't do something. I think government is very easy to sell for, and it's a much more valuable proposition because it's much less flighty than consumers. And so it's like someone in private equity said to me, it's like an annuity. Once you get the contract, it stays so much longer. So I sometimes think we don't think about the LTV, like the work it takes versus a lifetime value. So for me, government, one, I think is worth it, but two, I actually don't think it's as difficult as people think. I think government works really well on pilots. So one way to get around traditional procurement is to go and say, hey, and then in my experience, pilots turn into contracts, but you're already then in the system. And so pilots was really important. So pilots has been very important. I also think something that's important. So like one example, when we started our payment stuff in Marin, the county of Marin, we just said, try us on top of your system that already exists. So you don't even have to get rid of them. And they had already gone through traditional procurement, and then you perform better. So then they got rid of their payments person. And now we're launching on December 1st as their whole payment suite. And so, but we were just like, don't even worry, just try us. And because we have functions like sending text messages or reminders or other things, we didn't even need them to get rid of it. We said, keep them on your website. We think we'll perform better. And so I think showing performance, I think pilots, I also think, software folks have trouble selling to government sometimes because they're disrespectful to government. They don't see the value and they think they're going to be smarter and better. I believe so many people I love and know depend on government being successful. So I am rooting for government's success. Like I want to do everything I can. So I think when you approach someone as like, I believe in government. I believe it hires people, that it creates opportunity way before tech ever has and will. I believe it cares about the people that I care about the most. So when I'm trying to sell, I'm literally trying to make it better for the people that need it the most. And I think that's very different than most software companies who come to me to ask for advice. They're like, oh, I can make it more efficient. Oh, I can do this. And I don't know many people that sell like that.
Yeah, so plus 1,000 to all that was said. And I think I developed a lot of empathy for government because I worked under the Obama administration during the passage of healthcare reform. And that just also gave me a sense that these are folks who are working on big problems that need support. And we have to really approach them with respect. I think that was something that really has helped me. I think the other thing is really think about what is your best path and gateway to government. I know for us, we've always been really embedded in the civic communities. Some of them are like hack nights that happen on a weekly basis or a monthly basis. I know we first just launched something really small in as far as Alaska. And they were so excited with our ability to pilot with them that they jointly presented with us at a conference that a lot of government stakeholders were attending. And they basically sold our product for us, right? And I think the idea of having evangelists that you work with, that you know that they have influence in a sphere, has really, really helped us as we've been able to connect with government agencies. I also think the other big thing, depending on your space, I know for us, we have a very specialized contract that's just focused on food stamps across like pretty much all 50 states have this kind of like special contract for food stamps. But for us, what we found that works is thinking about reaching out to the state government from a local anchor organization. So who's in your space that you have kinship with that has a vested interest in people being able to access food with dignity, in our case, that would write an email to a state director and say, hey, you should meet with them. You should be thinking about this. And we found our fastest closing and moving through the process when it doesn't just come from us, because I know there is this challenge I think I sometimes find as being the Black woman out in the middle of Chicago, reaching out to the state director in the middle of Connecticut. Sometimes you really do want to use familiarity and localization to really help you move forward in the process. And that's worked for us.
It's always funny funding GovTech startups because I was a poli-sci kid and I just love it because the government's not going to get better if everyone just ignores it and doesn't sell it good products and services, right? Like we need people like you to make the government better. All right, next question. Phaedra, you are a mom and a founder. So every day, instead of getting punched in the face once, you get punched in the face a whole bunch of times. How do you handle it? What have you put in place to make this somewhat manageable for yourself?
Yeah, it's a great question. One, I just want to say, I think it's really important that we're having this conversation with women. And I just want to say that when I first went to YC, it was really overwhelming. One, because I was a Black woman. Two, because I was over 40. We were joking earlier that like I came in a minivan in Birkenstocks and shoes. And it was like all these young dudes who were like, I froze a brain and I have a whole product. And I was like, yeah, we have an idea and we're trying to figure stuff out. And we almost left because I also did not know how to code and did not have a technical co-founder. So I just want to say, I think it's important for people to see other models of how people can raise money, be successful. And so I think that's really important. And what was harder for me in general is that I haven't found like my place. Like I love Rose, but it's not like there's another crew of like Black women moms, like in every other place I've been. Like I was like, oh, they're my people. I think the hardest part has been not having people. And so at work. So you create that in your own company. But I think that's one thing I think that is difficult in tech. For me, I think one thing I think that's also important, sorry, Michael, this is my last commercial, is I don't think there's honor in making $50,000 a year. I think as moms and as Black women or people who have student loan debt, helping their families, like, I think we should make sure to not tell everyone like, this is so cool to be like that. We should like work out of that. So one thing I do is I don't pay myself $50,000 a year. Two is I try to explain to my kids.
Phaedra, just to be clear, you pay yourself more, not less.
Yeah, definitely. Because I think if you're like a young kid who just got out of college, staying like your parents are paying your rent, it's like honorable to like make no money. I don't think that's honorable and realistic. And I think we keep people out if we don't figure out a different model. And so one thing I do is I explain to my kids why we're doing what we're doing, like why this work is important. And it's funny because like my daughter went to school and was like, my mom gets people out of jail. And so I was like, well, that's fine. That's how we're going to talk about it. It's like, my mom gets people out of jail. And so I think that's important. I also think like we have a place that was purposely built for kids to be there. And so I recognize that I work a lot. So if I don't have a space in place that my kid can eat snacks and can draw on the walls, it's not going to work for me. And I think what's been beautiful about this moment is like, I love that people are at home now because we get to see their teams and their families, and like, that's the company. And so I think of being a mom as a strength, because what I feel lucky about when I do recruitment is people don't feel like there's places for them a lot. And we are creating a place where your whole self is welcome at work. And so you are dealing with your parents, you are a parent, like, and so I think the only thing I can do is create a company that works in the way that I needed someone to work and be that. So I'm a mom, I make my kids breakfast, I take them, and I'm also really disciplined about my time. And I get up at 4 a.m. Like, I want to be transparent. I get up at 4 a.m. I work until my 8-year-old gets up. And then I take a time, like I do work a lot. I just have to organize my schedule. Okay. One thing I will say, this is my last thing, Michael, is I met this YC alum, and I won't talk about who she is because it would be obvious, is she was like, you just have to not be a good parent. And I think we have to reject that notion that we don't get to be good parents. Like, that to me is the worst. Like, no, we should be good parents. And she was like, well, I think it's important that matters.
Yeah, I am not a mom in full disclosure, but I totally agree with what Phaedra has said, especially about workplace and how you create space, whether or not you are a mom or not. For moms in your workplace, as a founder of a team that is all women, it was super critical in the before times of the pandemic for us to have things like a place for moms to breastfeed, a place for just more access so that moms could feel like they could do both of their most important vocations, right? And I think for us, I know this isn't for every organization, but we adopted FMLA, even though we were small. We also were able to really get fertility benefits completely covered underneath our health insurance plans, and also fertility leave, so that as we're thinking about your path to parenthood, whatever that might be, that you could at least affordably get to egg freezing or embryo freezing if that's something that you want to pursue. And so I just think that it's also about culture and whole self, and making sure that people don't feel like they have to hide at your workplace.
So I want to get into what I think about in my head is the depressing section of this talk. So startups have become a lot more popular now, and there are a lot more people who want to do them. And I think one of the challenging things about startups is that it's so rare that you choose to do something that 99.999% of people fail at. And I think sometimes we're not honest with people about just how good and how lucky you have to be to succeed here. And so I'd like you all to talk about that. You know, both of you have had some significant wins since doing YC. but you've also been in batches with very smart people who haven't. So how has your thought about how hard it is to actually succeed at this? How has your thought changed? And if you were, one of the things I always think about is that you shouldn't ever go into a battle without knowing a little bit about how hard it's going to be. So can you talk a little bit about people who are thinking about doing startups to give them a sense of, exactly how challenging this is and exactly how much better you have to be than most people to even get the amount of success that you two have gotten so far?
I feel like you're thinking something, Rose, so I'll let you go first. Your face looks so delightful.
You're muted,
Rose.
Okay, perfect. Sorry. Wow. So, I mean, I think that the thing that has been really helpful for me is resilience practice. I think that when you are a woman and you've had to face so many challenges and adversity in your life, that does give you a sense of when you face something really difficult and challenging, how you're going to overcome it and how you're going to avert the death of your company and your startup. And it does give you a place to pull from and strength to be able to do that. I think for me, it has been really inspiring and critical for me to remember that I'm standing on shoulders, that I'm not the first Ghanaian American Black woman to co-found an organization or a company. I know at least I was someone who I had people in my extended family who had successful businesses in Ghana and then also here. And when I felt like I couldn't find immediate examples in my immediate family, it was so critical for me to be in YC, to meet people like Phaedra, who also gave me so much confidence when, there were periods in our company where we weren't closing sales and it was super hard and we didn't know what we were going to do. And I had her to call to really help me think through how am I going to close my next sale? How am I going to make it happen? And she could actually walk me through the playbook. So I really do think that, and I don't want to be too crazy and say it's inherent in women, but I do think that we have what it takes to really face any of the adversity that may come our way because of all of the challenges that we have to survive to even get to this point where we are right now.
One, I just adore Rose. But I don't think it's hard, Michael. And I think it's like hard to be a single mom in COVID working at Safeway or Burger King. Like, I think this is a charmed life. And my mom was a waitress. And so I think any day for me at work is 1,000 times easier than it was for her as a mom. And so I think that I have to work to earn the opportunities that I've been given and to create space for people who aren't like me. So I feel a greater obligation, like Rose's existence frees more people. And so our job is to live free. And our job is to create companies that are successful so that we create opportunity for other people to be successful. But I am conscious every day that no day at work for me is harder than our customer service people who are making less, who have more responsibilities, who don't have as much support. And so, I mean, I feel grateful. I think what we should realize is how to manage the balance of recognizing that we have charmed lives versus we're also working really hard, right? Like, how do you not let yourself start to doubt that you did things to deserve it so that you have an aspiration? But I was a union organizer and we'd always get these young kids and they would come dressed really tacky and they'd be like, we're with the people. And what I learned really early on is that working people wanted me to be better, as they said, than the boss. They didn't want me to like not dress appropriately, not be good. And so I feel like our job is to win. And that's why I'm like, no, I want people to invest in our company because we are going to be the best company, which creates opportunity for other people. And what's hard to me is the lack of community, which is why people like Rose are so important to me, or other women. But like, I don't think being in a startup is hard. To me, losing would be hard. And that's what I worry about is like, and I think to the extent you have more fear about losing than the process of winning, I think you're better set up. right? But if you're worried, like, I'm not going to worry about winning because it's like, shit, I'm trying to win. Like, that's not stressful. It's like, when I feel like I'm losing, that's stressful. But anyway, I think we should be honest with ourselves. Like, we've raised, between us probably $30 million. Very few Black women have raised $30 million. We have this, you love us, you support us. We have the support of a lot of people. Like, our obligation is not to be stressed. Our obligation is to create more folks like this. And then to recognize and cherish every day we get to do this.
So
Absolutely.
I love those two answers, but I'm going to ask one more to press.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I want to dig a little bit into the truth, you two are not normal founders. Like, you two are more effective than average YC founders, which makes you more effective than most founders. And so, sure, like, you have a lot of different ways of getting through the hard moments, but like, there are other people who, if they were running your companies would be dead right now. Most other people. So when you're trying to be kind of real with people who are thinking about whether this world is for them or not, like, how do you, under what circumstances would you tell someone, like, maybe they're not cut out for this? Maybe this isn't their world? Because I don't think that's bad. I don't think that's, like different people are amazing at different things. But how would you advise someone who is thinking, is this world for me? Some reasons why maybe it might not be.
I've definitely had that conversation.
Right? I just feel like we got to be real with people.
I'm rougher than Rose, so I've definitely had that conversation with you. Rose would be like, maybe there's some way, and I'm like, no, sister, you should start some. Like, we should rethink this. It's like, one, I think if you're, maybe I'll say what's been hard. So then I think that I would tell other people not to do. One, I think if you are sensitive, it's a really hard gig because you get a lot of feedback, and sometimes from people who don't have any sense. And so I think if someone can't take feedback, I think it's really hard. And I think too, it's hard also when you don't have clarity of vision, like when you're not sure what you're building to. So like when I hear people say, like, oh, I want to run a startup, but they don't know what it is, what it's going to achieve, how it is, I'm always like, you should go work at a startup, because this, like, it doesn't happen. I haven't experienced it happening like that, especially when you are a woman or Black or other things. It's much harder to get through the process. The idea that the company will create itself. I think, so when people don't have clarity, like when they don't have clear mission and purpose, I don't think it's going to be sustainable. They just want to be like rich, run a startup or do whatever. I always say, like, I don't think this is the right thing. I think when people don't understand scale, like what working at a startup did to me is like, help me understand that technology could replace things that we were doing over and over again. So just not understanding how technology works, I think makes it hard to do that. If you don't have a vision of how software will actually work, I think that's really difficult to lead a process through. I think if you don't have support, it's also really hard, meaning like your family doesn't understand it. I also tell people who financially sometimes it doesn't make sense for, right? Like if you just got out of college and you have an offer from Airbnb at 200 and some thousand and you want to come work here, like a startup may not be the right choice. Like you should think through, like, what are your life? Because equity, there's a chance that equity doesn't work out. And so I always say, like, what's your real financial plan? And is this the right step? And so I definitely think there are cases where they're not, but I have to say this, I got a text from Brittany, who's on this thing, and she's amazing lawyer who gets people out of prison for nonviolent drug offenses. And like, to me, when people succeed, like when they are amazing, like when you have it, you can go translate that anywhere. That's when I tell people you should, is like, like I was in music before, I was in nonprofit, did other stuff. To me, it's like, if you have the desire, deep desire, that I think is transferable among anything, is like, you can do anything. And so that I tell people, who cares if you don't have any of those things, if you have that. But I think that we have sold a vision that a startup is a way to get wealthy, and that is not true. Oh, and if you want people to be kind to you, in my experience, like I do maybe 2 panels a year because we're heads down. And so mostly I get negative feedback every day. And mostly people are mean to me. It's not like, this is nice. I see all these amazing women and they're nice, but this is my experience 2 days of the year. And then mostly I hear, I did something wrong. I broke it. Pricing, we need to rethink. My kids tell me I suck. You know, like I just want to be clear. It's mostly that.
I love that.
Yeah. Plus,
Rose and I like, Rose, did you make it through the day? I did okay today. Okay, good job.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with that. I think really the big thing, if I were to really just think about one thing that was the linchpin for us, I think it's about the commitment to make the time investment to work until the work is done, you know, and this idea that, you know, when we co-founded this, it wasn't going to be like we were doing this as employees. Like this is a completely different animal. And you're optimizing for success and you're optimizing for results. And you really have to remember that when you think about the time investment to get to those milestones. And again, I'm not endorsing like complete, disrespect of any kind of work-life balance or any kind of like self-wellness care consideration. Like you have to be strategic. But I do think that when I talk to people and they are approaching this as if they might approach it if they got an offer somewhere else, I think that's a flag for me that, you know, this is a really different animal than just participating at a workplace.
You know, I really appreciate you said that. I think that we don't talk enough about how much personal sacrifice is involved in doing this type of job. And I think that you two have optimized it so that you're working on a cause you care about so much that every day you can do the math and say the sacrifice is worth it. And I think that that's an amazing hack. Like, I mean, and I would describe that as a hack, right? Like, how do you make sure that you can maintain motivation when you're getting punched in the face every day? Work on a problem that you'd be proud of to be said at your funeral, to be on your tombstone. And then like, it'll always be a source of motivation. As opposed to the kind of get rich quick style thing that you were talking about, Phaedra, which is just like, oh, it never feels quick. That's nothing describing it at all. All right. As my last question, I'd like to talk about software. So both of you are non-technical founders building software company. Rose, you have a technical co-founder. Phaedra, you've had to hire software engineers. Talk about that experience. So often I meet people who say, oh, well, because I'm not technical and I don't have a technical co-founder, I have to outsource all of my engineering. You two didn't decide to do that. So talk about it a little bit.
So I think my experience, I co-founded mRelief with an amazing chief technical officer, Genevieve Nielsen. And we actually met in software engineering school. And, you know, of course, I did not take that anywhere near all the way. She studied so rigorously and really, really developed a knack for software engineering. And at least for me, having at least some exposure to it gave me this empathy for engineers that I think really has allowed for us to have longevity in our relationship and collaboration and co-foundership. I think that's like the first thing. You really want to be thinking about what is your collaboration and alignment with your co-founder so that you can really optimize for the best results and the impact that you want to make in our case in terms of what results really mean. And then I also think the big thing that I learned early was that people need to have proof of progress. And I think that really allowed for us to really kind of draw the through line that it's not just the wins of new contracts or partnerships or revenue, but also the optimization wins that you have to be just as loud about in your organization to motivate your engineers. Like we celebrate recurring donation features with cakes, just the way we might, the new latest, foundation deal, right, or contract. And so I think really being on it, being committed to honor all kinds of labor that takes place in your organization has been really helpful for me in thinking about retaining and committing to a software engineering team that's in-house.
I appreciate that. I would never outsource engineering because it's the core of what we do as a company. And I think that if you're not an engineer, it's even worse. Like I will never outsource engineering until I know I can build the product myself, which essentially means we will never outsource it. And because, you know, a company is basically made on profit and margins. And the assumption on software is that margins get better because software makes you more efficient. And so if I don't understand how to make us more efficient, then I can't understand how to make the company profitable. And I think the way that you make decisions about how to become profitable is also a values-based decision. And so for me, it's both understanding functionally how our company is going to work and how our software will. And then from a values perspective, it's like, where are their efficiencies? So that was important to me. And then when I've seen people outsource product, which it feels like that's what you're doing when you outsource engineering, is I see it, I haven't seen it really work well ever. And the reason is because you're disconnected from the core function of your company. And so I think maybe if I was a technical co-founder and I could just write it myself or do something, I might be open to it. But because I am where I am, I feel like that's what I have to be closest to. And that's where I have to understand how to create margin. Because if you think like for a SaaS company, let's say I want to be at $1 billion valuations, my margins have to be at 70 to 80%. The only way I can get to 70 to 80% of margins is through efficiency. So I have to understand, like, I have to know, like right now we're at 55% margins. We have to get to 70% margins. I can't do that through humans. And so I have to understand that.
Well, I think we're about at time. And what I want to say, and I'm not sure if I've ever said this to you two in person, but working with both of you has been amazing. And I think that, you know, being trailblazers in YC meant there weren't a lot of people who looked like either one of you. But I think what's so amazing about you doing YC and doing your startup so well is that the women who come after you will have you to lean on and to build on your shoulders. So really just want to thank you for sharing all your thoughts today. And needless to say, based on everything you've shared so far, there's a lot of work to do. So I think all three of us are going to get back to work.
We love you, Michael.
We do, Michael. Thank you. And thanks to PG, Jessica, and everyone else in YC. I really appreciate y'all.
Have a great day, you guys.
Take care.